LARP stories from last weekend at Zenithstrand, the September Zenithstrand game. I was playing Erin, the spooky wild elf witch who you have heard many tales about. I realize now I've been playing her for about 3 years, which is a pretty long time for a LARP character. Almost 3 years. She's like on the borderline somewhere in there, which is a pretty long time for a LARP character, and she's got like a bit of tenure at this point. You know what I mean? She's got a bit of presence in the game space, which I'm happy about. Obviously, she has survived as a horrible witch, and I hope that she survives further, of course. But so, my game started. We decided not to take the canvas tent with us this game. So the trip up was me and Siobhan riding with Tammy. And so Tammy was driving and we were riding with her, and we didn't have a way to transport the big canvas tent. And also it was going to be really cold, like a little bit more cold than we could deal with, like seasonably for the tent. So we thought Tammy had like won one of the bids on renting one of the cabins on site, because the cabins are all privately owned, because it's like an SCA site, which is the Society for Creative Anachronisms, I think. And like all the buildings are privately owned, and the land is owned by one of the members. And so they're all privately owned cabins. And so there's like a bidding war for them before a game. You know, people will be like, well, it's my cabin, so like starting at $40, how much will you pay to use it for the weekend, sort of thing. And so Tammy had won a bid on one of the cabins and was like, you want to just come in on my cabin? I'm going to sleep in there with a white headband on and just like be out of game, but I know you guys need space. So we're like, yeah, totally, we'll do that. So we were in on Tammy's like cabin win, basically, which is cool. You know, I'm happy we got to do that. Because it was definitely the right call for the weather. The weather was cold as fuck and rainy. Like, it could not have been drearier, basically, the whole weekend. The whole weekend, it was cold and wet. And when I say cold, I mean, like, almost 0. You know what I mean? Like, Celsius, that is. Like, almost 0 degrees Celsius. So it wasn't quite cold enough for it to be snow, but it was just on the opposite side that it was just really fucking freezing rain. You know what I mean? Like, it sucked, weather-wise. It was not a good game for the weather. So I'm glad we had a cabin. Stuff I did at this game, let's see. So Friday night, the game got started at around its usual time, sort of like 11 p.m.-ish. I was already feeling a little bit like worn down at that point. I had like taken a nap instead of being around and socializing for that first part of the game. Like, I was like, Siobhan, come and wake me up when it's game time, because I don't want to socialize with people right now. It's cold and rainy, and just come wake me up when I need to be in character. She's like, okay, I got it. So, you know, the game started, and we were outside and wandering around the grounds a little bit, and I think the first thing that happened was we ran into our good buddy Skull. Like, we were already with Enhelene, who's like one of our Gen Vespin members, played by Ryan. And then we ran into Skull, who we hadn't like entered game with. And Skull's another one of our Gen Vespin friends, who's had a little bit of a demonic contract issue recently. Being that, like, he has a magic staff that's bound to his hand, like, it's soul-bound, he can't put it down, and that, Greed, the demon of Greed, can see through his eyes while he has it. And we thought we'd solve that problem by gouging out his eyes, but when he showed up, he's like, you know, visibly glowing green eyes, and I'm like, oh, fuck. Okay, we haven't solved the problem. We need to break this staff, you know? So the first thing we did was we went to Bruce, the legendary blacksmith in town, who can like dismantle stuff. And we went like, Bruce, smash this, basically. And Bruce was like, okay, sure. And we went to plot to figure out what was going to happen, and then Bruce broke the staff, you know? But the issue was, he broke the staff disintegrated into like demonic chunks, you know, like green fell grossness, you know? that we couldn't use for anything. The resources were expended. Usually when you break stuff down, you get resources, but we got no resources because it's a demonic item. Resources were expended, and Skull's eyes were still glowing green. This is kind of an issue, because it means that just because the item is gone, Greed is still spying through Skull's eyes with the staff gone. You know what I mean? Well, he got rid of the thing that I thought was gonna get rid of the magic effect, but Skull was still under its effect, and I don't really, you know, like, me personally, it's not such a big deal, but, like, I really don't want a demon spying on everything I do through the eyes of my friend. That's just, like, not something that I'm into. It's not something that I want in my vicinity, you know? I do things that maybe that demon might not agree with, and I would prefer that they not see those things. And same for Iman. Iman, who's a light weaver of Sybil, you know, doesn't want a demon spying on her all times of the day. So we really need to get it fixed. Luckily, I had a Mark of Greed. But we wanted to see if we could solve it some other way first, because the Mark of Greed will allow me to, like, contact Greed personally and talk to the demon, basically, and try and, like, figure out a deal. But we got caught up in the middle of some other stuff. There's, like, a wild elf that came up to us who was part of the Nightshade Wild Elves, like an NPC. It was like, 2 people have gone missing. 2 of our people have gone missing, and we're looking for them. Do you know anything about it? And my first thought was, I wonder how recently those people went missing. 'Cause I killed 2 Nightshade, like, months ago for a ritual. I don't ask him that, of course, because that line of questioning leads to him maybe guessing that I know who is missing or where they have gone. You know, I don't want to ask that. So, so I was like, oh, like, they've gone missing. Did you hear anything? Did you see anything when they went missing? Do you know anything about who took them? You know, being the concerned wild elf that I am. This was with Iman, Skull, and Helene, all with me. Being the concerned wild elf that I am, you know, of other wild elves. Where did they go? And they're like, we didn't hear anything. We just heard the muffled cries and the dragging of boots, basically. And I went, well, the only thing I can think that, like, steals people in the middle of the night would be the spiders in the spider cave. Have you checked the spider cave? And they're like, no, we haven't checked the spider cave. All right, well, let's go there. Let's check, you know? And so I went walking off towards where the spider mod had been last game, which is like this little alcove in the woods. Fully realizing, of course, that this dude, this Nightshade, who had called in another Nightshade and another Nightshade, there's like 3 of them at this point, that these dudes, like, they could totally just ambush us. We're leading them away from town, away from help. Like, if they decide to jump us, they decide to jump us. You know what I mean? Like, and then it's a fight. And I was pretty confident we could win if that happened, but still, it's always a little nerve-wracking when you're like, oh, these obvious assassin NPCs. I'm gonna play my character and continue to lead them into the darkness, you know? So, lead them into darkness. And lo and fucking behold, like, I'm talking to one of them, you know, and we figure out that neither of us know where the people are, and that we're not part of this town, and that the town might have some idea, but we don't. We're not with them, you know? And it looks like it's gonna come to a peaceful solution, and then suddenly one of them attacks! Just out of nowhere. I thought we were through into a peaceful solution, and then one of the Nightshade busts over and starts, like, hammering into me with a stiletto. So, like, for body damage, just straight through my armor. But the thing is, contingency sleep goes off. It's a dummy effect. It happens whether I'm surprised or not. The first strike that hits me, contingency sleep. So, basically what happens is, he surprises me, but then he's asleep. I take 1 hit, you know, like 10 body or something, which is a lot of health. It's like most of my health. But then this Nightshade is asleep. And the other two Nightshade look confused. They look surprised. Like they're wondering why their friend just attacked me, basically. And so I go over to the guy in charge and I'm like, what the hell, basically. And he goes, I don't know. Everything's fine. Like, we didn't order it. I didn't tell him to do anything. I don't know what's wrong with him. And I go, all right, so it's his fault? Just him? Like, yeah, he acted on his own, you know? Okay, good. And then I start draining the blood from him while he's lying on the ground asleep. Because he's asleep. He's not dead or whatever. He's just asleep. I start draining the blood from him. At a 60 count, which is like a minute count, you know? At a 60 count, I do 1 damage to him. He wakes up, but I get his blood. Basically, like, I have drained his blood. I get that. And then he's, like, panicking and waving his weapon around as he gets up. And his buddy calms him down. And I go over to him and I look him in the eyes and I say, don't do that again. If you do, it will be much worse for you. And then I cast Blood Curse on him. I summon a Hex to inflict Blood Curse, which expends the unit of his blood. Like, the unit of his blood is gone. But any spell I cast on him echoes now. So anything that happens to him from me, double. Basically. So it's like, don't fucking try this again, kid. You know, don't think you can just, like, come up and stab me, friend. I would like you to try again. You know? Please, do it. Sort of thing. And then we left them to their own devices. We heard a lot of the game that they were around, like, that night was, like, a night of them stabbing people. Like, they went around murdering townsfolk, basically, that night. That was their modus operandi for the evening. There's a lot of, like, oh, we've been cornered by the Nightshade and stabbed, kind of stuff like that. So yeah, that was pretty good. So yeah, but Blood Curse is pretty cool. It's the first time I've ever gotten to use that spell. I always have, like, 1 memorized, but it's the first time I've gotten to use it. Yeah, if you have their blood, everything you do to them echoes, which is super good because it means that, like, if I cast Shatter Skull and he goes dodge, I can say echo, which means that he has to dodge again or eat it. You know what I mean? Or shield magic or whatever. Whatever defense you have, you better have 2, basically, which is a lot less likely in Underworld. You're, like, likely to have 1 defense, maybe 2 defenses. After that, you're probably done, you know? So we dealt with the Nightshade and let them do their thing. And then we went to consider what we were going to do with Skull and his eyes. And a spirit came to talk to Iman about her elven shard. She had asked some months ago, you know, I seek the knowledge and death regarding my shard. And that's like the elven soul. So Iman used to be a high elf, and now she's a wood elf. Or not a wood elf, a wood fae. And she thinks that her shard, the shard that was like her, you know, her high elf soul, basically, that she didn't get when she became a wood fae, has, like, gone somewhere and, like, is in trouble or something. We don't really know. So it's like, you know, Iman asked the question about where the shard might be and who might have it, or like what's happened to it or whatever, and the spirit comes to answer that question. And of course, as soon as the spirit is there, Iman's like, Skull has to leave. Skull can't hear this conversation. Skull still sees through the eyes of a demon, you know, like, we can't have that. I'm like, that's fair. So I grab Skull and we like walk a little further away. And sit in a bush, you know, and like wait a little bit. And I'm talking to Skull and I'm saying, you know, like, what are we gonna do? How are we gonna fix this? I think I have the answer. You know, I'll use the Mark of Greed. I'll talk to Greed and I'll give him the soul of Zippy Many Shinies, because we have no reason to keep that soul. It's just a soul that we have that will have some value at some point. But to a demon, a soul is more valuable. And this is one of Greed's to start with. So giving it back to him means he just gets something for free, basically, if he stops touching you, you know? And Skull was like, yeah, okay. That sounds like a good idea. And I went, wait here, don't move. I'm going to go back to the cabin and get the soul that is, like, in a box, you know? So I leave him there, and I go back, and I see the other two are still talking. Or Iman is still talking with this the spirit outside the cabin, and Skull is... Angeline is still sitting nearby. And I go into the cabin, and I grab the soul, and we go to plot camp. We get to plot camp, and I go, knock knock. Is anybody home? And they're like, oh yeah, come in. So we come into the plot camp cabin, and they say like, what do you want? And I went, well, I am burning my Mark of Greed, and I want to talk to Greed. And they're like, okay, you do it. Greed's here. Okay, let's have a chat. And I say, Greed, stop spying through Skull's eyes. I will give you this full soul, this full juicy soul, if you never touch Skull again. Okay? Greed's like, I don't know. I need something from him. I want something from him. And I'm like, I'm paying for him. What does it matter to you, O Lord of material gain? Where it comes from. I'm giving you a soul, a whole soul, just to get you to stop doing something. And they're like, yeah. Yeah, okay. You give me the soul, and I won't touch Skull again. All right, great. Shake hands on it, and Greed's like, pleasure doing business. And as we're leaving, Greed goes, I still have a bunch more, like, really valuable items and stuff. I got lots of stuff to trade. I got all kinds of things. We can make a deal, for more stuff. As we're leaving. And so I turn, and I enter back in, and I go, oh, Greed, before I go, and I offer him my hand again, another mark, please. You're talking about all this stuff that you have. You want to make another deal? Then I want to be able to contact you to make another deal. Greed's like, done! Innate mark of Greed, marks me again so that I can call on Greed a second time. Which, seemed like a good idea. To be honest, being able to access a vast store of material goods for trade for our material goods just seems like a good plan, So I got another Mark of Greed, and we got Skull cured. Skull is cured. Finally, the saga of Skull being blind or Greed looking through his eyes or any of that shit, it's done. We did it. It's done. Yeah. Aaron just summoning that demonic vendor. Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah. So he's cured. No problems there. Bad demon deal, finally fixed up. Which I'm very, very happy about, obviously. I think that was the last thing we did on Friday night. I think after that, it was sleep time. So we went to bed and slept pretty well in the cabin. I mean, it was nice and warm. And when I say nice and warm, I mean we had nice and warm blankets. The cabin itself was not nice and warm. Siobhan and I were just very well blanketed. We shared like a double bed, and then there were two bunk beds, and Tammy was on the top one, and Skull Brody was on the bottom one. Yeah, it was good. It was comfortable, pretty much, and yeah. And then Saturday, I'm trying to think of if there was anything else on Saturday, but the first thing and the most pressing thing that I remember on Saturday is Argus. So I hear, we're sitting in the cabin or getting ready or whatever, and I hear a cry of pain from outside, someone like yelling in agony. And I bust out the door and I go around to where I heard it. And Samvel is standing at the door of this cabin, one of the people that you guys haven't heard much about probably. Samvel is standing at the door of this cabin, and I went, what happened? He goes, well, it's just Argus. He's hiding from the sun. And immediately my brain is like, Argus hiding from the sun? What? Like the sun burns the undead. Argus is an aspirant cleric of the god of death. You know, like, these two things do not mix. Argus should not be undead. What is happening, you know? And so I follow the hullabaloo of people all standing around and go and find Argus. And I find him in the center of town. It's raining like fucking crazy at this point, by the way. I've got my witch hat on and my heavy cloak on. I find Argus huddled up at the back of one of the buildings, and there's like all the people in town are like looking at him, basically. And he's huddled up back there, and I go, Argus, come with me. And I reach out a hand and I like pick him up, basically, and he's like visibly undead. I'm like, okay, that's fine. Argus, come with me. Where are we going? My house. Let's go. You know, like, and I drag him back into the sunlight, and he's like, I'm trying to shelter himself as we walk across to where my cabin is. And I get him inside, I sit him down. Iman, Angeline, Skull, and I are, or I think it's just Iman, Skull, and I think on this one, are sitting around him. And I start to explain, like, I wasn't going to leave you there in the middle of all those people. They're all just watching you. Somebody's going to do something stupid, or you are. So tell me what happened. And he says, I don't know. I absorbed a broken shard of my soul, one of my reflections earlier, and they were undead, so maybe it has something to do with that. Well, and Vesmir's mad at me for taking a blessing of another god and some other stuff. And we go through a lot of, like, how can we fix this? And I'm like, well, we could send you through the resurrection circle. We could kill you, and that would solve it. But it would shatter your soul again, or would like splinter your soul. We would have another copy of Argus running around, which we just solved, so that didn't seem like a good idea. And then Argus starts talking about some stuff. I can't remember exactly what he said, but then he said something about a graveyard. And I said, Argus, you have a graveyard? Where? He's like, at the top of the hill. Well, then the answer is simple. You're a corpse. Let's bury you. And if we bury you, and Vesmir takes notice, the god of death, you know, natural death, I suppose, takes notice of the fact that you are where you're supposed to be, then maybe you'll live. If not, my problem's solved either way. Let's bury you. Argus is like, that actually might work. That plan might actually be a good plan. Let's do it. Let's do the plan. Like, all right. Let's go, Argus. You know, drag him back out into the sunlight. He's flinching and walking, like trying not to disintegrate, basically, keeping his blanket over his head. And it is raining buckets. It is raining so much at this point, and we're trudging up a hill to where the graveyard is. And we get there, and we have a Shaper with us, Tammy's with us, to you know, adjudicate what's gonna happen. And I start digging, like, you know, doing a count for digging a grave, basically. I don't actually have a shovel. I'm not actually gonna break the ground. Like, it's not what I'm gonna do. This is a site we're renting, you know what I mean? Like, but gotta do a count to dig a grave. So I'm standing there in the pouring fucking rain, digging a grave for my undead associate, you know? And eventually I get done, and I go, Argus, lay down. And then he gets down into the grave, and I count to fucking push it all back in there. And at this point, my hat has drooped like this. It's got like a brim like this. My hat has drooped like this, and there is water literally streaming off of it. The hat is wool, so it doesn't sort of absorb too much of the water. It keeps warm, but there's water like trickling off it. It was like super cinematic and like badass cool feeling. You know, like there's this like Helm's Deep level of rain happening around me while this is going on. And 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 so I bury him back up, and I walk away, and I leave him there. And that's it. I left him there, and I walked away, and it was at that point that I realized that I was fucking sick, like definitely real life ill at this point. Like I had felt it on Friday night, maybe a tingling of it, but I had been out in the weather and I shouldn't have, and it was bad and whatever. I was kitted out for it. It was just like a bad coincidence, you know what I mean? Like I have my wool cloaks, I have my wool hat, I've got all this stuff that's really good for rain, but like sometimes you just get sick, you know what I mean? Like it happens. But so it was about midday Saturday when I said to Siobhan, you know, like I'm sick. I'm gonna go to bed, and in character, I went to bed. You know, like in the cabin, and I took off my gear and I got, you know, like ready to sleep basically, and I was in a bad way for most of the game. Like Saturday through from like 11 o'clock in the morning Saturday all the way to the end of game and like and beyond. I mean, I wasn't on yesterday. I have been like fever, chills, like can't get warm, sick, you know. So, you know, it was rough, right? But my friends are so good. My friends are so good, and my partner is so good, because I was in bed for the rest of the game. I didn't get up a single time, but they brought me food. They came with visitors, people to speak who needed to speak to Aaron or who wanted to speak to Aaron. They came with plot points that they wanted my advice on. Like, I stayed in character. I was just stuck in my bed, you know? I was just Aaron, but sick, you know? And I tried to sort of like play the game from my bed, you know, because I didn't want to go out of game. I didn't want to try and like get a ride home or anything like that. I didn't want to disturb anybody else's fun time, because I knew that I was suffering, but that other people were fine, and that I was fine to be in bed. You know what I mean? Like I was fine to be in bed and just like suffer the chills a little bit and like know that I've got some medicine. I'm doing everything I can. At home it would be no better, like that kind of stuff. Like it's a bed either way sort of thing. So I played it in character from bed. Like Argus came around after, and he came in and he's like, "Oh, Aaron, can I speak to you?" And I'm like, "Yes, come in." And I'm lying in bed, sort of languid, you know, like totally trying to recover. And he goes, "It worked. It worked. The thing you did, it worked. The plan was good. I'm back to normal." And I went, "Great. I'm glad that you're fine." And he's like, "I have no idea how to repay you. I don't know what you want for repayment for your help." And I went, "Argus, at some point in the future, I am going to need you to help me with something, and you are going to have to help." You know, all this kind of stuff. Where I was kind of making bargains from bed most of the game after that, like and stuff. There isn't really much else for me to tell you, and I don't really think that there's much else I need to tell you, because honestly, I was in bed, and honestly, I don't remember some of it because I was sick. I was sick, and I was just trying to be in character enough that I could play a scene and then just fucking collapse back into bed, right? Like, I would sit up, I would say something Aaron-y, and then I would lie back down, go to sleep. You know, that was kind of my weekend. I still had a great game. I still had a great time. You know, I still came away with it feeling like it was worth it. But there aren't really any more stories for me to tell you about that. I just thought, like, why try and get a 3-hour drive home from someone? It's not like I can drive myself. Why ruin somebody else's fun when I can just stay in bed and hack it, you know? I can stay in bed and like have Erin like preside her court from bed, you know? Have people come to me and like report back on stuff and whatever. And like I was kind of the home base, you know what I mean? Like our people would come back and they'd be like, Erin, just want you to know this is happening. You know, I have shaman, just want you to know like this is the thing that's going on, that sort of stuff. Yeah, it was all right. Yeah, my commitment to being a creepy death witch thing is admirable. I'm glad that you think so. Because it was basically either that or I get like really out of game, don't interact with anything, sleep the whole weekend, don't do anything, or try and get a ride home and ruin someone else's fun, which I just wasn't gonna do, you know. So that was it. Thankfully, we had a cabin where I could shelter and like be dry and stuff. It would have been much more difficult if we'd had just the tent, I think. But thankfully, I had a cabin space to sort of just like curl up in and be sick, you know. Siobhan, on the Saturday night, I was really, really bad. I was like very shivery and like fevery and stuff, and Siobhan was like, I'm not going back out. I'm not going back out. Other people can go back out. I'm not going back out. I am going to lie here next to you and make sure that you are warm and that you are okay. And I was like, oh, so nice. Snuggle. So, you know, stuff like that. It's like very, very, very cute, you know. But yeah, I mean, it lasted until today, and it's still, I still feel it, honestly. Like I'm still like sitting here talking to you guys for this long. I'm like, oh, you know, still a little bleary.